This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. The next hour will run through all the business news stories you need to know about from across Africa and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the markets here for you. It's really a case of two kinds of market. On one end, you've got the JSE and the Nigerian stock market, both closing very strongly in a positive territory. The trading flow, of course, in Nigeria has essentially been shut down effective the 25th of March. Expected a lot more remote trading. The bourse has also extended its end March deadline for companies to actually file their results as a 60-day grace period that is now in place. Kenya's NSE 20, another hard day over there, smashing through the 1900 level, down by almost 3.7% in today's session. Here's what's coming up tonight. Governments across the continent start measures to support their economies in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria's central bank holds its benchmark lending rate as it monitors economic developments. And entrepreneurs are cashing in on do-it-yourself hand sanitizers as demand rises and prices are still relatively high. That's all in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start in South Africa, where the country's president announced a nationwide 21-day lockdown that will start from midnight on the 26th of March. Now, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa's most industrialized economy rose to over 550 earlier today, and authorities there are still racing to try and contain this public health crisis. Citizens will still be able to leave their homes and buy food, seek medical care, and collect social grants. Cyril Ramaphosa says that the army is being deployed in order to assist police officers during this period.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to enforce a nationwide lockdown for 21 days with effect from midnight on Thursday, the 26th of March. The nationwide lockdown is necessary to fundamentally disrupt the chain of transmission across society. I have accordingly directed the South African National Defence Force to be deployed to support the South African Police Service in ensuring that the measures we are announcing are implemented.
All right, then, so let's get the latest on this from CGTN's Angelo Coppola. He's live in Johannesburg tonight with more data on this story. Angelo, do we know what South Africa's testing capacity, at least at this point in time, for COVID-19 is, and how rapidly those results can be turned around?
Well, look, we know that last week the NICD, that's the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, gave the private testing labs permission to test. That's also increased the amount of reporting and the amount of tests that have been undertaken. And of course, that's led now to more positive cases being identified, statistically at least. Hence that spike in those positive cases. Also, the private clinics are also announcing their results. It's then up to the NICD to verify whether those figures are, or that test is accurate or not, or positive or negative. We spoke to the NICD and Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. They reckon that the time to provide a result was at 12 hours, and that's a couple of weeks ago. Now, we're not sure how that time has changed as the number of tests have come in to be verified, so that hasn't been clarified just yet. This morning, of course, the health minister called on laboratories that are doing tests to complete the forms correctly, or properly as he put it, because it seems that there's a large incidence of pending results waiting. So that we have the result, but we don't know, for instance, what the gender is or where that person traveled to. So the travel history can't be tracked, and that means that the people can't be tracked who might have been in contact with that positive case. There is also the question of the number of testing kits. And we heard from Bladen Zimande, the Science and Tech Minister, that they are in the process of accrediting several labs to actually manufacture the reagents needed for those tests. No timing has been provided on that, though, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there, Raman.
Indeed. So who's footing the bill, though, for all of these tests? Is this coming out of the government's and essentially taxpayers' pocket, or are they splitting some of these costs with medical insurance firms and hospitals, depending on who does the test?
Well, look, it's a tale of two cities here, really. The insurance firms are saying that, or most of them are saying that they will not cover any costs for any negative test results or any equipment used to determine a negative test result. That's of course for that very small portion of the population that can actually afford those monthly premiums that the insurance companies are charging. You'll of course know that the high unemployment numbers in South Africa mean that many of those people are excluded from doing those tests. That includes the working poor as well, of course. The government hospitals are doing the testing at no cost, but that's only after going through a person going through a really rigorous questionnaire. And most importantly, the patient has to either be symptomatic or can show that they've been in direct contact with a positive case. So people who are concerned but are asymptomatic are being advised to not go to a hospital for a test, because they probably won't get tested unless they can prove that they've been exposed to a positive case. So the costing remains for personal their own cost if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, you have to be symptomatic and prove that you've been in contact with a positive case, Roman.
So the president also made an interesting observation yesterday in his speech when he announced this lockdown. He flagged a combination of factors that make South African society especially vulnerable to a pandemic like this. A combination of poverty, malnutrition, a large segment of the population with suppressed immune systems, in part because of the HIV epidemic. How's the state ensuring, on the preventative side, access to clean water and sanitation for vulnerable populations at this time?
Well, Raman, that was probably the most disappointing presentation or briefing session we had today at the International Affairs Department, simply because we didn't get any clarity. Lindiwe Sisulu is the minister in control of housing, or that's human settlements, water and sanitation. She's under pressure at the moment. The contamination of the Vaal River system, you'll be aware, hasn't been resolved just yet. And there's a lack of water in many rural and peri-urban communities. That was also highlighted today. Sisulu said that her department was actually deploying all available water tankers, as she put it, to more than 2,000 identified communities that don't have access to water in the country. She also, at the same time, made a plea for manufacturers of water tanks to reach out to her department. And in her words, she wants to buy all available water tanks in the country as soon as possible. Sisulu, of course, is indirectly responsible also for the country's sanitation system. Many of the municipalities, of course, have line responsibility, and unfortunately, most of the sewage works are either in a state of disrepair, broken, or very inefficient. So we've got all this untreated and semi-treated sewage water that's pouring into the country's river systems, which doesn't make matters any better. Before the pandemic, of course, Sisulu had set up a task team to deal with that pollution issue, but we haven't heard anything positive about it since, Raman.
Indeed. One last question for you, Angelo. How are companies responding, especially on the supply chains, to this pandemic? Are there sufficient supplies still coming in, or inventory of food, medicines and other necessary equipment, not just to tackle the pandemic, but at least for that 21-day lockdown? Well,
look, the ministers, since they started with the state of disaster last week through to last night's announcement and today, have been at pains to say that the supply chains remain intact. Special attention was also paid to the retail sector, which, as you know, has seen several rounds of panic buying since last Sunday in most provinces. But an agricultural economist was saying that food supply chains are very solid. Local food production is considered an essential service, for example, and with the drought broken in January, he expects there to be a record maize crop this season. In terms of medicines, we've heard about the plan to locally produce those reagents for the testing systems. We don't have any insight, unfortunately, into other medicines that might be needed by people who are ill or equipment supply chains at this time, Raman.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. Angela Coppola there live in Johannesburg. Now, a continental overview is next. So far, over 2,000 cases of COVID-19 have been reported in 43 countries across Africa. Let's take a look at the numbers, essentially region by region. Let's start in Northern Africa. It has the highest number of confirmed cases as we speak. Infections in Egypt have jumped to 366 after 39 new positive cases were reported. 5 more people have died in the country. That includes 4 Egyptians and an Indian national. Algeria is second in the region, 29 cases over there. The total has come to 230. Authorities so far said that 17 people have died from the disease. Morocco has 143 cases. It's reported 4 deaths and 5 recovered patients. A 1-month state of medical emergency has been declared until the 20th of April. In Western Africa, Burkina Faso has the highest number of cases in the region, 99 positive tests there. 7 new cases of infection have been reported in Senegal. That brings the total number to 86. The Senegalese President Macky Sall has declared a state of emergency, along with a curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 in the morning. Ghana has also recorded a second death from COVID-19. 25 new infections reported there. The total count in the country is up to 52. In Eastern Africa, Kenya's cases have jumped to 25 after 9 new cases are detected on Tuesday. Out of the 9, 7 are Kenyan nationals, 2 are foreigners. Rwanda maintains the highest number of cases in the region, with 36 infections reported over there. In Central Africa, Cameroon's numbers are up to 72 from a previous count of 56. The Democratic Republic of Congo has also seen a rise. 45 new cases have been confirmed in that part of the continent. And the number of confirmed coronavirus cases in South Africa has spiked to 554. 152 new infections confirmed in the last 24 hours. The country is the worst affected in Africa thus far. Now, authorities in Tunisia have announced a $900 million fiscal support package to deal with the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's CGTN's Alain Chouachi with the details.
Authorities have postponed the repayment of bank loans for a period of 6 months for people with low incomes, which do not exceed $300.
The point is not to abandon the low-income people and Tunisians in need or without support in this situation. Tunisian banks and financial institutions will contribute to this national effort to face the coronavirus repercussions.
The country's premier also announced the deferral of the payment of bank and financial institutions' debts for a period of 6 months.
Banks and financial institutions will have less resources because people and businesses will not be able to pay back their credits and loans. This is an international sanitary crisis that will cause an unprecedented global economic crisis.
The government has opened a $100 million funding line to support layoff workers, allocating $50 million in the form of subsidies for the benefit of vulnerable and low-income groups and persons with disabilities.
I'm closing the door indefinitely. The government's measures will help businesses face difficult times. The middle class is as vulnerable and with a low purchasing power as the poor class.
The state has provided an additional budget of $165 million to support strategic medicines, food products, and fuel stocks. Tunisian Premier Les Farfer has suspended all legal proceedings in financial crimes. He also ordered to halt any decisions to shut off electricity, water and telephone services for a period of 2 months. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Nigeria, as I mentioned earlier, now has 42 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and that includes the president's chief of staff. CGTN's Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja that authorities in Africa's biggest crude oil producer have issued several directives, all of which are aimed at limiting the movement of persons.
The son of Niger's 2019 presidential candidate has tested positive for coronavirus. Mr. Atiku Abubakar said his son, who recently returned from a trip abroad, is being treated at a specialist teaching hospital in Abuja. Most of the confirmed cases of coronavirus in Nigeria are from inbound travelers who arrived from high-risk countries like the US and UK. Nigeria suspended all international flights into the country shortly after confirmed cases of coronavirus almost doubled on Saturday. The government has reiterated that all those who return from foreign trips must self-isolate for 14 days to be sure they are free of the virus. In addition, some states in Nigeria, including Lagos and Niger, have asked public officers to stay at home for the next 2 weeks as they try to curb the spread of coronavirus. About 70% of Lagos' entire workforce have been asked to comply. According to the state governor, the stay-at-home order does not affect first responders, including medical personnel, fire service officers, personnel of the State Emergency Management Agency, as well as the Waste Management Authority. President Muhammadu Buhari says the government is doing its best to contain the coronavirus and stated that efforts are underway to expand the number of test and treatment centers across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, as more and more African countries restrict movement to only the bare essentials for some logistics firms, this is a significant business opportunity, especially as far as last-mile delivery is concerned. Kagorio Monyo is the Chief Strategy Officer at Kobo 360. It's an e-logistics firm that operates in Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana and Togo. When we spoke earlier, I asked her how company operations were going on in West and East Africa's largest economies.
There has been a surge in food demand in both Kenya and Nigeria. This is as a result of people being asked to stay home. So the demand from FMCG, from food manufacturers, has shot up. On the flip side, in countries such as Kenya, we're seeing quite a drastic decrease in terms of containers. And this is mainly because most of the containers or imports come from China. And so a drastic decrease on that side. And then the third thing is that for cargo that's crossing borders from Kenya to Uganda, there's been a slight delay as more and more health checks are being implemented across the borders.
Based on the data that you're seeing at the moment, what kind of pain points are starting to emerge in client supply chains? Because for a lot of companies, this entire switch to working from home and having to essentially rely on a third party for logistics might be a pretty drastic switch.
I think we're coming from the point of it's something we need to do. We all need to work from home to prevent the pandemic. So in our case as Kobo, the first thing is that we've got to keep the supply chains going in the markets that we are in, whether it's in Kenya or in Nigeria. And then the second thing is that how do you keep your staff safe during this period? And so the implementation includes, trainings for staff in terms of hygiene, providing whether it's gloves or hand sanitizer that people need. Those who need to work from home are given the opportunity to work from. And so it's a cycle of information, procedures that are given. And then what we have to do, we have to have people on the field loading. Logistics is vital to ensure that people get food even when they're being asked to stay home. And so this is part of what we're doing. We've had to adapt. And the beauty of it is being an e-logistics platform, we operate where you don't have to be face-to-face with the customer for them to make a demand or a request for a truck. And so it comes in handy that they can press a button, make a request, and they are sure that their cargo will arrive safely without having to be so physically involved in the process.
Given the scale of the crisis that we're looking at here, though, is there any willingness, are you sensing any willingness by authorities to allow firms like yours that are in the logistics business, that essentially act as a matchmaker between demand and supply on one hand, is there any willingness to relax some rules to allow you to experiment with different ways of getting deliveries, like UAVs, for instance?
I think the government has been quite concerned and putting effort, whether it's in Kenya or in Nigeria, in ensuring that supply chain will continue, especially for essential cargo. So what I would say is that there is the recognition from governments that the supply chain or logistics needs to go on.
On to run now through some corporate headlines, starting in South Africa. Mining companies over there are bracing for a heavy hit from the looming nationwide lockdown designed to slow down the spread of COVID-19. The sector's warning of an expected leap in costs in addition to lost output and revenue. Now, a leading producer of platinum, palladium, coal, gold and iron ore, South Africa's labour-intensive mining sector is a potential hotbed of infection among the thousands of miners often tend to work in pretty confined spaces underground. Comair, the operator of low-cost carrier Kulula.com, will suspend flights between the 26th of March and the 19th of April, following the president's announcement of a 3-week lockdown effective from Thursday. Now, the coronavirus outbreak has severely affected the local and global airline industry, and it's put enormous strain on Comair's operations. The JSE-listed firm has a license to operate British Airways branding in the country. Kenya Airways, in the meantime, has offered complimentary tickets to Kenyan citizens in the United States who want to fly back home as the last flight departs New York on Tuesday. The Kenyan government announced that all international flights will be suspended from midnight on Wednesday as part of a broader range of efforts to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, the Boeing CEO, Dave Calhoun, says that he doesn't want the US Treasury to take an equity stake in the plane maker as a condition of government loans as credit markets freeze amidst this pandemic. Boeing has sought $60 billion in government loans from the United States for itself and the broader aerospace industry. Congress could reach an agreement on a stimulus and rescue package of up to $2 trillion, and that's designed to respond to the huge economic damage from this pandemic as soon as Tuesday. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Plenty coming up, including this. We'll explore why Nigeria's central bank decided not to lower its benchmark lending rate earlier today. And a locust invasion in Niger has brought residents some good tidings. That sounds contradictory, I know, but we'll explain in a moment.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Niger. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's central bank has held its benchmark lending rate essentially unchanged at 13.5%. The governor, Godwin Emefiele, says the MPC and the central bank in general will take time to assess measures already taken to support the economy in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the bank's MPC voted unanimously. All 10 members voted to keep rates exactly where they are. Right then, so let's explore why this decision was taken. CGTN's Deji Badmus is in Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos. He joins us now with more details on this particular story. So, Deji, let's start with the CBN's perspective. What kind of damage are they expecting this pandemic to have on Africa's largest crude oil producer?
Well, Ramah, I think the question should rather be what damage has actually been inflicted. A lot of damage, and of course the CBN governor made that very clear. The first damage, of course, is on the country's revenue. Revenue from oil, as you know, the revenue from oil actually drives the economy here. 90% of close to that amount of percentage now of government revenue actually comes from oil. Now we've seen the damage that has been done. It has forced the government, for instance, to cut its budget now by 1.5 trillion naira now, and it's had to review the budget benchmark. I'm talking about the oil price budget benchmark now, cutting it down from 57 to 30. And of course, the CBN governor pointing out to lawmakers today, because the lawmakers are yet to approve it anyway. So the CBN governor making it very clear to lawmakers not to review the benchmark upwards now from the current $30 that the executive is proposing. So manufacturing is really down. Productivity is low as a result of COVID-19. The economy is grinding very, very slowly. And that's the reason why the CBN just about a week or so ago had to come up with those stimulus now to sort of keep the economy running. And so it's done a lot of damage. The issue now is we're only hoping, and that's what everyone is hoping, that that further damage is not done to the economy. Of course, the CBN has had to devalue also as a result of COVID-19 and the drop in oil price and the drop, of course, in government revenue. So it's done a lot of damage. And as the CBN governor actually pointed out, the hope is that this would clear up very, very soon so that things can go back to normal.
Right.
If not, if things get worse than they are now, then the government might be forced to take further measures, including the CBN as well.
Right. So other economies, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, in the last 2 weeks or so, they've all cut rates. Like in Kenya's case, for instance, on Monday, they reduced the cash reserve ratio, essentially releasing a bit more cash into the real economy. But Nigeria has decided to keep its policy rate essentially unchanged. Is that because it had already taken action earlier on in the year, or is there another reason to keep the policy rate at 13.5%?
Exactly. Exactly, Ramah. It's because, and the CBN governor made that clear because, I mean, this issue came up during the briefing by the CBN governor, and he made it clear that the reason why the Monetary Policy Committee decided to leave rates the way they are now is because the actions that the CBN ought to have taken have been taken already. A week ago, the CBN actually announced a raft of measures now, for instance, granting it actually cut rates now on its intervention facilities, totaling about 3 million naira now out there, 3 trillion naira, I should say, out there, cutting interest rates on those intervention facilities now from 9% to 5%. Now, that is something massive when you consider the impact that will have on agriculture and some other intervention programs of the central bank. Not just that, I mean, the CBN also announced that it was pumping in, providing credit facilities now to households and companies, of course, small and medium enterprises that would have been affected by COVID-19 now. $133 million was made available for them. And of course, the CBN went on to ask, basically ask banks now, deposit money banks, to actually restructure the tenure and loan, the terms now of the loan that individuals and companies are taking, especially individuals and companies now that would have been affected by COVID-19. So a raft of measures that the central bank announced. And then it talked about strengthening the loan to deposit ratio. And let's face it, Ramah, before now rates are down. So, I mean, with the CBN preventing individuals now participating in the OMO market, rates are already down. And then you look at all of these policies now, I mean, these measures now that the CBN took. The CBN said, look, it's better to wait to see this, measures now permeate and take root before you begin to think about what else to do. I mean, these measures were just announced less than 2 weeks ago anyway. So, there's a need to wait and see what actually happens.
Okay, we'll leave it there for the time being. Deji Badmus, live in Lagos. Thank you very much. Now, in the wake of the winter season, we've been talking about desert locust invasions in East Africa for a while now, and on this end of the world, they're a complete menace. They're essentially threatening food supplies. Not the case, however, in the Sahel, particularly the northern regions of Niger. They've been invaded by swarms of desert locusts, but over there, that's a bountiful supply of free protein.
The markets in Niger have been inundated with desert locusts since the end of the winter season. There are dozens of sellers of this edible insect all over the country, and it's a booming business. In the capital Niamey, the Katako market is one of the best-known places to buy and sell the locusts.
Luckily, many people consume it. The price of a bag of locusts varies between $80 and $100, but we also sell in retail, and sometimes it's exported to foreign countries.
Generally, I buy locusts in large quantities. I prefer to come to this market because the prices here are affordable compared to other markets. I like the locust, and when I come here, I buy for the whole family and friends. Today, for example, I bought 13 boxes.
Mardia Omaru has been a locust trader for over 10 years. Every day, tens of kilograms of desert locusts are fried and sold from her home, with the use of chili, garlic, salt, and a few other ingredients. As a mother and a widow, the income made from this business helps her to provide for the needs of her whole family.
It would be a lie if I ever said that this business does not pay. I have 4 children and all go to school. Thanks to the sale of locusts that I managed to educate them. I indeed have another activity, but the sale of locusts is my main source of income. By the grace of God, it pays a lot.
Niger's regions of Maradi, Zinda and Tahawa are where most of the locusts are caught. They use nets, their bare hands, or even pesticides. But nutritionists warn against the use of chemicals.
There are many drawbacks to consuming locusts when they are not properly caught. It is very dangerous to use pesticides to catch locusts because pesticides are harmful to human health. They can cause digestive disorders such as diarrhea, vomiting, and even allergic reactions. In the long term, the ingestion of pesticides can cause cancer.
The locust trade is becoming a big informal sector in Niger. In 2013, the Food and Agriculture Organization recommended the consumption of edible insects to enhance food security. According to specialists, the dry weight of a locust consists of about 62% of protein. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
At 18:30 GMT, you're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up shortly. China eases travel restrictions as it goes for a week without new cases of COVID-19. And stay-at-home policies are forcing migrant workers in China to make some unanticipated choices in order to cope.
Holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Authorities in China say they will start relaxing travel restrictions to and from Hubei province from the 25th of March after months of lockdown. The country has registered nearly no new COVID-19 cases in more than a week. Now, the decision does, however, exclude Wuhan, that's a provincial capital and ground zero of this ongoing pandemic around the world. People inside Wuhan will be able to leave the city from the 8th of April. Travelers to and from Hubei province, however, will still need a green code. That's a type of a smartphone barcode that essentially indicates what their health status is. They will also have to undergo a test to prove that they are free of COVID-19. Wuhan's auto industry, though, is back on track for the most part, with more and more factories getting their operations back online. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei reports.
It's Peng Quin's first day back to work after a 2-month-long leave he never expected. Although the pandemic has affected his life, Peng says he's lucky that he didn't lose his job.
When I came back and saw my colleagues, I knew that everything was back to normal. I feel so relieved.
Peng works at one of 3 assembly lines owned by Dongfeng Honda Automotive in Wuhan. Not all of the company's production factories are back up and running. Some workers still couldn't make their way back, but the company could not wait any longer.
The operation suspension has affected our work with suppliers and dealers. The loss from production can affect both the company and staff. Our clients want to get our cars as soon as possible, so we are in a rush to fulfill orders.
Lee says virus containment is still paramount while at work. As the operation gradually resumes, Lee says he's confident to see a positive response from the market. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Now, elsewhere, the IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva says that the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic could be even more costly than the 2008 financial crisis. She says it will also require an unprecedented response.
We will massively step up emergency finance. Nearly 80 countries are requesting our help, and we are working closely with the other international financial institutions to provide a strong, coordinated response for largest possible impact.
Lawmakers in the United States are still divided on how long the economy can tolerate ever-expanding shutdowns, particularly in the private sector, due to this pandemic. A $2 trillion stimulus package has failed to pass a second procedural vote in the Senate. CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King tells us where the country goes from here.
While saying the U.S. government is doing all it can to tackle COVID-19, the U.S. president says the battle can't come at the cost of the U.S. economy.
America will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting, a lot sooner. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem.
Meanwhile, state governors continue to close more schools, businesses and whole communities in a bid to stem the infections and save lives. And Trump's medical team is also urging more shelter-in-place isolation measures until the war is won.
I want America to understand this week it's going to get bad, and we really need to come together as a nation.
Trump listed supplies sent to states that continue to say they have severe shortages of medical masks, gloves, gowns and ventilators. Hospital ships and field hospitals are on their way, but behind the curve of new cases. Trump praised ordinary Americans working to care for the sick and keeping supermarket shelves stacked. And after days of calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus, Trump said Asian Americans should be protected.
It's very important that we totally protect our Asian American community in the United States and all around the world. They're amazing people, and the spreading of the virus is not their fault in any way, shape, or form. They're working closely with us to get rid of it.
The US president's rhetoric may be calming down as the crisis grows, but the deep divisions in the US Congress over a $1.4 trillion stimulus package is far from over. A big fight over who gets what and why and when is basically stopping aid from flowing to American workers, hospitals and companies. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
And essentially news of optimism around that particular package is driving American equity markets high and high at this point in time. The Dow Jones up 8.2%, the S&P 500 essentially following suit up about 6.3%. The Nasdaq, however, is around 6% in the green so far in today's trading session. Now back to China. Many of the country's migrant workers are still waiting for opportunities to rekindle in big cities after months of closures, of course, due to this pandemic. Others, however, are staying closer to home, and they've found a way to put their skills into use.
Taking good care of newborn piglets is a daily priority for Li Chunyan nowadays. The 35-year-old from Muchuan in southwestern China's Sichuan province says she enjoys her new caretaker role.
I have never done this before, but people change according to the environment. If there were no epidemic, I would not think of raising pigs at home.
Li used to work at a factory making spare auto parts in Wuhan, the epicenter of China's COVID-19 epidemic. There, she earned about 5,000 yuan or $700 each month. She had intended to return to work after the Lunar Chinese New Year in late January. But those plans went astray as soon as the city was put on lockdown. And it was then that the two sows were about to give birth.
My parents kept some 30 pigs last year and made a considerable profit, so I think it's something worth trying.
Lee says she has a lot to still learn about farm animal care, how to keep the piglets warm, feed them properly, and keep them from contracting swine fever or flu. Nevertheless, she hopes to be raising 50 to 60 pigs by the end of the year, which could earn her family about 300,000 yuan at current market prices.
I have another idea too. I want to raise several hundred chickens. I'm still discussing this with my parents since they haven't done it on a large scale either.
Lee's parents say they're relieved to see her return after working away from home for nearly 20 years.
I'm very glad that she decided to come back. I can help and support her in stock raising.
Another reason Lee came home to spend more time with her 9-year-old son. Data shows that last year, about 290 million rural Chinese sought employment in cities, with most parents leaving their kids with their grandparents.
My hometown has undergone radical change. My father said he had never thought that a road would be built to my home. In the past, our bamboo could only be used as firewood, but now it's turned into money as they can be sold easily.
Lee says she's very optimistic about her future development in the village. With the whole family staying together, more opportunities may be theirs to tap into. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Muchuan County in Sichuan Province.
Berlin's nightlife is legendary. Ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, dozens of former warehouses for ammunition and vehicles, bunkers, power plants have all been turned into clubs. However, since the 13th of March, the beat has stopped, quite literally, in the German capital. All of the clubs in the city have been closed as part of efforts to fight this pandemic. To maintain some kind of normalcy, however, roughly 250 nightclubs in Berlin have now teamed up to bring streamed DJ sets to the public. It's called the United We Stream project. It started on the 18th of March. It will keep running until the clubs can open their dance floors yet again.
Die Berliner Clubs, die gehören zur DNA dieser Stadt.
The clubs in Berlin are part of the DNA of this city. The perception of Berlin is really strongly influenced by these small clubs and with the artists that are out on really diverse program every night. If that were to fall apart and the city just becomes filled with large companies and chain stores, then Berlin would look very different. That would be a really big shame.
Gesicht bekommen. Und das wäre sehr, sehr schade. Yeah, United We Stream is...
United We Stream is a platform of solidarity to bring clubs, event organizers and artists together in this difficult time when all the clubs have closed.
Wo alle Clubs geschlossen haben.
Welcome to the age of the Instagram concert. Right, a quick run through commodity prices here for you. So Brent crude does seem to have found its footing at perhaps temporarily in the $26-27 barrel range. Brent crude futures for May were about 1.37% higher at 15.57 GMT. Lingering concerns, though, about the supply glut and evaporating demand are still roiling markets. Gold, on the other hand, seems to be back in favor with the traders out there, 4% higher, vaulting over that $1,600 an ounce mark. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore how entrepreneurs are cashing in on the do-it-yourself hand sanitizer market when we return.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Canada, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Authorities in Uganda are encouraging people to stay at home as part of a larger range of efforts to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, the East African country has confirmed at least 9 cases of people infected with the virus, but many fear that the number will inevitably rise. And local businesses are now scrambling to adapt to contactless delivery systems. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesigo with this report from Kampala.
Henry Lewega is a courier at an online marketplace, Jumia, Uganda. He's been instructed to keep a 1-meter distance from all customers.
You can put the item on the doorstep, then the customer comes, verifies the item. After verifying, he or she puts the money at the doorstep, and you are supposed to come, pick the money from the doorstep, then you step back and the customer steps back.
Using this method, employers hope to keep their staff and customers safe.
We want to minimize the risk of contact, minimize the risk of transmission between us and the customer and vice versa. And so we encourage customers to pay cashless, and we're able to take an item, deliver to your premise without touching you in a safe manner.
Uganda is currently on a partial lockdown because of coronavirus. And for those who want to buy products while at home, this online shop is increasingly becoming an option. The company has also taken other measures to contain the virus, such as regular temperature checks. The Uganda government has issued guidelines on how to stay safe. They include anyone with a flu-like symptom is required to seek treatment, wear a mask, and stay at home. It's hoped that if these measures are complied with, many Ugandans could be saved from contracting the disease. Hilary Ayesigo, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
At this point in time, there's no certainty as to how long this pandemic will last. 6 months, the whole year, who knows? But either way, most people are now working from home. But as CGTN's Sumitra Naidu now reports, this is not an option for some enterprises.
Linda Lani Mkhize is the creative director of a South African gospel group. The group usually records an album in December and releases it in early January. The team then goes on tour. None of this is happening this year.
It affects a whole lot of people, especially when it's the Easter season. We actually get highly busy. People are thinking musicians, creative only. Everyone who work on a production of such a nature has been affected, and it's also affected their well-being, because that means they won't be making money, because what they do is hourly based. Month end will be very, very tough.
The president ordered all events to be postponed or cancelled. No gatherings with more than 50 people are allowed. Joyous Celebration doesn't know when it will be able to perform again. The production has 32 members, all of which rely on this income.
We were rehearsing because of the uncertainty, thinking that it's only a month. Perhaps we'll be ready to go back and do our shows and perform. But we realize that numbers are growing every day. We realize that social distancing is more important, and it's one of the best ways to actually deal with this. So we had to cut down and stop our rehearsal. Now, these kids, they even get an allowance for rehearsing. Now their allowance is gone now because they're not going to rehearsals. It affects us in every step of the way.
Mkhize says the government's leadership is crucial at this point. Creatives live off gigs and events, but he believes it's also time to think out of the box.
This is one time when the government really comes into play by a number of things. Within my group right now, we are trying to create what we call a virtual show, where we can stream a show and people can be able to watch it at home. Do events that are empty, no audience, but people can watch on TV at any time. So we are working on something like that. Yes, it's a new opportunity, which we find ourselves not having proper capacity for it. So the government again needs to come in and assist with the capacity for that.
Government is expected to announce a set of measures to assist small businesses, but it's not certain as yet, and creatives, artists and other workers in the entertainment industry may not be included. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, while panic over the COVID-19 pandemic did cause a run on hand sanitizers in Cape Town, as it did in many other parts of the world, the gin distiller Andre Pienaar realized there was something he could do with all the waste alcohol that his small distillery does produce. Across Africa, shortages of sanitizers and surgical masks could prove to be lucrative for some entrepreneurs, as CGTN's Alexander Majala explains on Grassroots tonight.
Andre Pienaar has been distilling gin in South Africa's Cape Town. But after the coronavirus pandemic, the entrepreneur has found use for all the waste alcohol. Pienaar had 140 litres of the 70% ethanol waste called gin heads in the trade just sitting around. So he posted on social media that anyone who needed some could have it for free to turn it into the hand wash at home.
I do feel a sense of responsibility to help the community. I have access to alcohol and alcohol can help people, so I'm going to do it as long as we can. But I would like, if this all blows over, that people still remember us for making damn good booze you can drink, not spray in your hands.
Across Africa, dwindling supplies of sanitizer and surgical masks could prove lucrative for discerning entrepreneurs seeking to plug shortages. Amateur chemists in Nigeria and Kenya are mixing up hand wash, while enterprising tailors in Rwanda are sewing their own masks. In South Africa, pure alcohol manufacturers have pledged to donate 40,000 litres for the production of hand and surface sanitizers. But the harsh economic realities of the pandemic mean that Andre has had to start selling his sanitizer to make ends meet.
So it's this weird reality now that we're in, where me selling alcohol for hand sanitizers is like putting food on the table for our family. So it's quite a weird space to be in, and I don't know where that puts us next week, next month, next year, but it's kind of like we'll see when we get there.
While business is booming for those selling masks and sanitizers, health officials warn that wearing masks in public won't protect you from the virus, and say sanitizers only work if it's more than 60% alcohol, and even then, soap and water are better. The continent of 1.3 billion people has recorded over 2,000 cases in 43 countries with 39 deaths. But there are concerns that Africa's creaky health infrastructure could be overrun as the virus spreads. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And over in Nigeria, residents in the commercial capital of Lagos are creating their own homemade hand sanitizers after a spike in the prices of the popular, easily available brands and a shortage of these products.
99% alcohol, otherwise known as spirits.
Moji Kusano shows ingredients used for do-it-yourself hand sanitizers. Demand for such shot up since Nigeria confirmed its first case of the coronavirus in late February. Kusano learned to make the generic hand sanitizer after combining a recipe on the World Health Organization website, which recommended mixing alcohol with aloe vera gel, with advice from medical journals which said glycerin should be added for its moisturizing effects.
I basically decided to make my own hand sanitizer because 2 weeks before the first confirmed case in Nigeria, I went to a supermarket and I got the really small bottle, the 50 ml, I think, for 200 naira. 2 weeks later, my brother went to the same supermarket and he was retailing at 1,700 naira. Now, I have 2 children and a large household. There was no way I was going to buy 1,700 naira for everybody.
In Nigeria's southwestern megacity of Lagos, many people lack access to clean water and cannot afford to buy popular brands of hand sanitizers. Prices of hand sanitizers went up by over 800% after the first case was announced. The jump in price is linked to a scarcity of the product.
Our scale has been about 100 cartons per month for small units, 70 ml, 100 ml, and about 10 tons per month for commercial customers. However, since the outbreak of the coronavirus also in Nigeria, we have scaled up production to 1,000 cartons per day for the household sizes and up to almost 600 tons per month for commercial customers.
Health experts fear an outbreak in the continent beset by poor sanitation and already stretched health systems is inevitable.
We are always assuming the worst case scenario in our company, and what we see, for example, in Germany, the Chancellor said that she expects 60 to 70% of the population to be infected in Europe, and we don't see any reason why that should not be the case in Nigeria, so we are preparing for these kind of scenarios.
Africa's most populous country's infections stand at 40, with 2 patients recovered and 1 death. The global total comes to more than 305,000 cases, with over 13,000 deaths. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Let's wrap up the hour with a run through the currencies. We spoke about the Naira at the start of the bulletin. It didn't really move much from the 381 level to the dollar that it did hit on Monday. But make no mistake, the pressure to devalue this currency has not gone away. The currencies of other oil exporters, Russia, for example, second largest producer on the planet, have fallen by about 15% so far in the year. Comparatively, the Naira's 4% move is a drop in the ocean. 3-month forwards at around 421, spot rates in the parallel market 403 to the dollar. So between a 50% drop in oil prices and the COVID-19 pandemic that's hollowing out demand, it's a question really of how much longer the CBN can defend this position. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us. All of them are on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.